Hello, my name is Chloe Knox. Today I'm going to be giving a brief physiological and physical analysis of judo athletes, and I'll be discussing how we can optimize performance and injury prevention as a sport performance coach. So this is a brief background of judo. It was founded in Japan by Mr. Kano in 1882. It's a martial art and Olympic sport focusing on throws, pins, and submissions. You basically want to get your opponent on the floor. It's a combination of technical precision and tactical decision making, and the match typically lasts around 4 minutes long. If there is a tie, then you have to go through sudden death, which is a tiebreaker, and the first opponent to score will win. And the strengths necessary for success would be grip and core strength, power, anaerobic capacity, flexibility, and reaction time. These are going to be some of the rules of judo. As we said, it's a 4 minute match. A tiebreaker is also known as a golden score, and the first opponent to score wins. There's going to be 3 ways to end the game immediately. That's either through an ippon, which is a perfect throw, a 20-second pin, or a submission, and that ends the game immediately. Partial scores are also known as wazaris, and those are just going to be the lesser throws or pins that aren't essentially a perfect throw. Leg grabs are prohibited, and there are penalties for stalling. A throw is made of 3 separate parts. The kuzushi is going to be called, also known as balance breaking. The sugiri is the fit-in, and the kake is the execution. The thrower will also be known as the gori, and the player receiving the attack will be the uke. So this is going to be a brief movement analysis on judo, essentially the primary movements and the planes of motion. They're going to consist of throws, grappling, takedowns, and pins or submissions. The throws are going to be power-based movements, lower and upper body. The grappling, that'll be sustained isometric strength, usually on the ground, always on the ground, and that involves grip endurance. Takedowns, that's going to be coordination, speed, and power. And pins and submissions, which are usually core strength and mobility, and also the sustained isometric strength. And it's going to be in all 3 planes of motion. Takedowns, sometimes they're in sagittal, frontal, and they usually alter into the transverse as well. So this is going to be important data for movement analysis. The work to rest ratios are pretty important. It's going to be a 2-to-1 to 3-to-1, with effort lasting 20 to 30 seconds, followed by pauses of approximately 10 seconds. So essentially the athletes are working for around 20 to 30 seconds, and then there will be pauses of 10 seconds separating those. So it's pretty glycolytic. Most judo throws last 1 to 1.7 seconds. Athletes spend 50 to 58% of match time in grip disputes. And the combat phases range from 23 to 28 seconds, with pauses lasting around up to 8 seconds. So the data found in this study was found using a pulling force device. That's essentially a fake torso connected to a chain, connected to a friction brake, which allows judo athletes to mock their throws. Elite judo athletes apply up to 2,000 newtons of force during their throws. Their peak force was achieved in approximately 100 milliseconds, and their throwing movements can reach peak velocities of up to 2.7 meters per second. So they're moving pretty fast. The kinematic data was assessed by inertial measurement units, and they found that lower limb actions contribute up to 70% of the force needed for efficient throws. These are some bioenergetic demands in relation to the different energy systems. For the throws, kind of the main movement of every match, that's going to be primarily the creatine phosphagen system. That's short duration, high intensity, and that's going to be the throws. For the grip disputes, that's going to be fast glycolysis. Those are more sustained, they last a bit longer, but they're still high intensity phases. And then the aerobic system, that's going to be essential for recovery between effort bouts and matches when they're trying to recover. This is some cardiovascular data that was recorded via graded treadmill exercise tests and through heart monitors worn during the matches. And heart rates averaged around 90 to 100% of maximum capacity during the match. The VO2 max increased throughout the match, and by the 4th minute, it reached to about 95% of VO2 max. Post-match blood lactate concentrations averaged to around 10 to 14 millimoles per liter, and that revealed that there was a heavy reliance on glycolytic energy pathways during the entire competition. So this is some information regarding the supporting leg versus the sweeping leg. This study used force plates and motion capture systems to measure ground reaction forces and leg movements. So the supporting leg found to generate more force than the sweeping leg. That was the leg responsible for generating force, and the sweeping leg roll, it was activating the hip flexors and adductors in order to sweep. So this is the same study that used the pulling force device to measure force applications of the different judo athletes. This is the device that was the fake torso that pulled the chain, that pulled the friction brake. And through the measurement of over 6 tests, the rate of force development increased by 61 newtons per second per kilogram, and the time to reach maximum force decreased by 91 milliseconds. So they found that their power and efficiency was already improved, and they also found that proper joint alignment and body mechanics reduced match fatigue by up to 20%. This study found that there was essentially 2 different ways that throws used to get people or opponents on the ground. They use force couple techniques or lever techniques. In the force couple techniques, it involves 2 opposing forces simultaneously creating one movement or rotation. And those 2 opposing forces come from the same athlete. And in lever techniques, they're just simply applying a force to a rigid body. They found that the force couple techniques demand 20% more energy than lever techniques, and that's due to the rapid coordination and higher force application that they require. This is a little bit about the injuries and limitations of the sport. In the 2008 and 2012 Olympic Games, the average injury risk was 11 to 12% per event. In high-level competitions, the injury incidence rate was 25.2 injuries per 1,000 athletes participating. And over the course of 15 years, involving 28,000 competitors, they found that there was a 2.5% injury incidence, and out of those injuries, 0.48% were severe, which required hospital transport. The most common injuries in the sport are going to be sprains, and that's around 42.2% of injuries, and then soft tissue contusions, also known as bruises, are around 23.1%. The most affected areas for injuries are going to be knee, primarily the knee, shoulder, and then also the elbow. And chronic injuries often occur in the finger joints, lower back, and ears due to repetitive strain and friction. Severe injuries are relatively rare in the sport, but when they do occur, they are pretty severe and they involve the brain and the spine. Injuries in younger athletes, they tend to be more so bruises and contusions. Fractures end up to being around 30% of injuries, and then sprains and strains come around to 19 to 24% of those injuries. In reference to gender and weight category differences, there was no significant difference between male and female injuries. They occurred around relatively the same rate. In female judo athletes, however, there was more elbow injuries compared to males. That can occur when your grip gets stuck in somebody, you throw them, and there goes the elbow. Um, and the highest notable injury rate occurred in athletes in the women's division, which were equal or less than 52 kilograms of weight. So, yeah. In regards to injury prevention, proper technique and form is very important. You want to learn how to correctly fall so you don't fall incorrectly and land on the wrong thing or land wrong. Um, Technique is very important, especially during throws and grips so that you avoid improper movements. And then in the strength and conditioning world, you want to build core strength to stabilize the body during all those movements. Enhance grip strength for better control overall. Lower body strength is important to absorb impact, and strong frontal plane muscles of the hip are very important to avoid torque at the knee. The adductors are very important in that situation. Flexibility and mobility training is also important for injury prevention. Proper warm-ups. Balance and coordination drills could also help stability-wise. In training, in order to prove stability, you want to raise the center of mass, load unfamiliarly, or incorporate some unilateral exercises. KPIs or key performance indicators. Grip strength is a large one because grip disputes are a large portion of the game. Elite judo athletes need superior grip endurance. Power is a large one that's for successful throws, and aerobic capacity because high VO2 max aids in faster phosphocreatine resynthesis, which can help in those throws. Attack frequency is also another important KPI. Elite judo athletes average around 10 to 12 attacks per match, with the success rate being relatively low, 20 to 30%. And then high-performing judo athletes defend against 70 to 80% of those attacks. Competitors that use a scouting-based approach, they usually outperform other athletes up to 15%, and that's just due to better anticipation. So there's pretty much going to be only two positions in judo. It's going to be the thrower, which is the tori, and then the receiver, which is the yuke. The tori needs precise timing, coordination, and real-time strategy adjustments for the throws, and then the yuke, they just need to focus on safety and proper breakfall techniques at that point. So these are going to be demands in relation to body position. So in standing combat, there's going to be more need for upper body strength for gripping and lower body power for throws. That's going to be also high glycolytic demand. The blood lactate levels usually rise in that area. And then for groundwork combat, athletes are going to need more dynamic and isometric contractions, and that is going to be less taxing on anaerobic energy systems. So this is just a table of data comparing novice judo athletes to elite level judo athletes and how their grip strength differs, their counter movement jump height, and their anaerobic shuttle run. As you can see, the elite level, they can run faster anaerobically, and their grip strength is a lot stronger than a novice level person's would be. This is a diagram of different throws in judo. There are more than these, but there's just a few of them. As you can see, they tend to start in the sagittal plane, but then they start to move towards the transverse plane and backwards, and so they're moving in pretty much every plane. This is an evolution in grip strength during a single throw. As you can see, the men is significantly higher than the women's, but it spikes relatively fast, very fast, and then it tends to lower towards the end of the throw. This is a table of injury frequency. It was collected during 128 major competitions throughout Europe's top-level judo athletes. And out of them, 2.5% of competitors required medical treatment. And as you can see, the most common injury would be strains, and especially contusions. First two phases I would include for judo athletes in a macro cycle would be the general preparation phase and then a hypertrophy strength phase. And in the GPP phase, the goal would be to build baseline strength, stability, mobility, and also incorporate some metabolic conditioning to get them used to the glycolytic work to rest ratios they're working with. And for the hypertrophy phase, the goal would be hypertrophy and also maximal strength. For the absolute strength phase, we're going to be doing really high loads and low repetitions, around maximum 6 repetitions. That's just for absolute strength. This is going to improve force production and neuromuscular efficiency. For the peak power phase, the goal is obviously to maximize power and rate of force development, and this is going to increase rate coding and essentially develop a faster athlete. Exercises I would include into a program that make a lot of sense for judo athletes would be farmer's carries because of the grip strength that they need. This also engages their core dynamically and places their shoulders under loads which they're going to have to stabilize. For landmine rotational rows, that's important because it simulates the throws that they have in their sport through the pulling and rotational movements. And then trap bar jumps are also important because of the vertical power across the posterior chain, which can transfer into those throws that happen vertically. Adductors are also very important because of the stability requirement that allows less torque in the knees during the sport. These are important training strategies to have, especially as a college sport performance coach. I'd say periodization is going to be one of the most important ones. You want to include a macro cycle and align training with their competition or season schedules. Individualizing programs is also important because you need a needs analysis and common injuries and to conduct assessments to get to know the athletes. Recovery is important for rest between sessions. Sport-specific movements are important to include in a training program, and you also want to be monitoring the athletes. So this is just some of the key points and takeaways that are important from this presentation and that you might need for the CEU quiz. In judo's physical demands, it's going to be high intensity efforts. It's heavily glycolytic. The work to rest ratios is 2 to 1 to 3 to 1. Requires a lot of power. The gender and weight class differences, the males and heavier athletes, they favor power-based throws, and then the females and lighter athletes, they excel in speed-focused techniques. And then key strengths are going to be grip strength, core stability, adductor strength, and posterior chain development. These are going to be some points that are important for sports performance coaches in general. You want to be able to individualize programming and structure periodization. That's where the macro cycle comes in. You want to be able to plan training phases. And then the sport-specific conditioning, which you need to be able to take work to rest ratios from the sport and implement it into the training for the athlete.